Okay, everybody. So yeah, this will be a fun day today. We have Liz Sanders here, and she grew up in Hot Springs. Did you go to Hot Springs High? Is that where you went to?
I did, yep.
Okay, I went to Hot Springs High and went and studied anthropology and has worked on organic farms, goat farms, and lived in Paris for a while, lived in New York, and is back in Hot Spring or in Little Rock now. So yeah, kind of made it full circle. So yeah, we're very lucky to have her here as our first new artist.
Hey guys.
If people have questions, they can go ahead and jump in, or they might be able to text for questions, and then we'll have some time at the end of the class for some more questions also.
So thanks to Dan for having me. Dan and I are really old friends. I am a Hot Springer, and it's really nice to be back in Arkansas. Cool. So I studied photography actually at Hot Springs High. There was an old science lab that myself and the photo teacher at the time turned into a darkroom. And we ended up creating a photo class. This is in like 2001. It's a while ago. And we ended up having 5 students, and we all learned black and white photography in high school, and it was really cool. We did a lot of little shows, and it's really where I got started. But where I really got started was sort of when I was a kid, looking at old photos of my dad. So I wanted to start first with talking about a personal project on him that sort of really started when I was young, in the closet looking at old photo albums that he had. And I'll show you those pictures. So the project is called Be Here to Love Me. And it is about my dad's battle with dementia that started in 2012 and ended very recently. So, but what started my interest in photography and what got me into doing photography in high school is that I had looked at all of these old photos. I'm sure you guys have photo albums at home, family photo albums. I don't know if you sit and look at them often, but the images were just so incredible to me. I think it was the camera, it was the light, it was so many portraits of him and of his friends, and they just really struck me. And so at the age of 14, 15, I was like, I just love images, and I want to figure out how to make them, and I want to make images that feel like these. So, and he was definitely a scrapbooker. So he was an older parent. So these pictures are from the early 50s. He was 51 when I was born. And he was really interested in photos of himself. It was kind of like the early selfie. Like he had people take portraits of him. And this is him. But I'm just gonna scroll through and just show you some images that are all of him that he had someone take of him. And they're all very posed. You see the one lying down next to the ivy. It's very Vogue. And, you know, I know you guys are probably talking about form and portraiture, and I know you looked at some portrait photographers. Who did you, Irving Penn? So these sorts of images, I mean, some of these poses are very classic posed portrait styles, and he just naturally was interested in kind of posing his body in a certain way. You know, and it's like the dude on the car, like, look at my cool car. You know, it's really interesting, the kinds of things, you know, it's like Instagram. It's like, what did you want people to think about you, you know? And even in the 50s, people wanted to look cool, and they wanted to have the nice car or the cool outfit. And so this is that version of that, except way before the internet. And I was also really touched by these images that are just sort of maybe accidental, or maybe this was a photo that he wanted to take of this tree, but there's this arm in the side, there's this car that's traveling. The way the staircase is going down, pointing towards the tree, there's just a lot of different things happening in the image, and I just love trying to look at them and figure them out. And so, like I said, he was a scrapbooker. He really cared about his clothes, as you can see. He said, you know, home on leave from US Navy, October 1954, picture with my mother. The jacket I'm wearing was a leather flight jacket. It's like, do not forget to mention this point. This is very important. I had this amazing leather jacket. And so he was from the country. Like, he grew up with no running water, no electricity, you know, in Arkansas in the Depression. So for him, going to the Navy in California was a huge deal. It was like, wow, I am getting out in the world. I am doing this thing, and I'm not, you know, in the country anymore. I have access to all these things. So I think that's also what started this kind of, I want to document this life that I'm leading now, and that I really want to remember. So I became interested in documenting too. And when I was young in high school, I would photograph my friends in the backyard. I would take my camera to punk shows. I would, you know, we used to make movies on VHS cameras. So it was just this thing that always interested me. And I really go back to his scrapbooks and his documentation as the beginning of that interest. So this is one of the first photos I took, self-portraits with him towards, I guess, the end of his life. But it was maybe in 2017, so it's been a while. I don't know if I consider this a successful image, but it was an image that I wanted to take of us together. And you know, if anyone knows about dementia at all, it's this idea that you start to lose where you are, you start to lose kind of who you are, what time it is, what year it is. And so he was very much there physically in this image, but he was also not quite there as well. And I wanted to capture that. So, so this was the first kind of image where I started to play around with, should I try to document this time in his life? He had done such an amazing job of documenting his early life. Should I document this sort of end of it? And could I do it well? How do I do it? And I was living in New York at the time. I studied photography at this school called the International Center of Photography. It's in New York. And I was working like 6 jobs. I was, you know, just trying to figure out, you know, how to survive up there, which is really an expensive place, as you guys know. But I had kind of a flexible schedule that I could fly back and see him Christmas, see my mom. And so I started to play around when I was able to be back in Arkansas, play around with this kind of, just bringing a camera to everything that we did together. So as I start thinking about the project, I think about, what is it that we're dealing with here? We're dealing with the loss of memory, and photographing the loss of memory, the end of someone's life, the end of their present life. So how do you do that with a photograph? How do you photograph what isn't there? And so I started making this list of things. How can I do this? So staged portraits could be one way. And I'll show you an example of that. Still lives, environmental details, objects that people own, things that he loved and had. Archival images. So the archival images are the images that we have already. They could be these images from when he was in the Navy. They could be torn out of a book from a library, just images that exist in the world that you can then use in a project. You could scan them, you can photograph them, you can put them in a book as part of a story. So I wanted to work with those as well. And then what I would call straight documentary, which would be like me, kind of like that self-portrait of us. You know, it's staged. It is a staged portrait, but it's also like he was sitting on the edge of his bed and I said, hold on, Dad, I want to take a picture, you know. That's documentary. And, you know, going with him to the doctor's office and photographing that would be a documentary sort of style. And then lastly, playing around with diptychs, collage, decontextualization and recontextualization. So diptychs being, you know, these two images together, how do they play off of one another? This is a photo of Dad in bed, and then those are these azalea bushes that he loved. So how am I bringing these things together, and what does it mean? How do I use them to show emotion? So those are the kinds of things that I'm thinking about as I start to do this project. So I'm just going to go through and show you some images from the project. So these would all be somewhat staged, right? I asked him to lay in the ivy. It was a hot day, there were mosquitoes, but he did it. He thought it was fun. We had a good time. This reminded me of what maybe it was like when he was a kid. He played in the woods all the time without shoes on, just running around. So I wanted to kind of take him out into the woods again in a safe way. This one, you know, he would always read the Sunday comics, but as his dementia got worse, he stopped really reading, but he would still hold the newspaper as if he was, but it was kind of just like a habitual movement. It wasn't actually like he was reading the words. And this is just him sitting there and holding the paper, but you know, he wasn't reading it. And then this one is after my mom shaved his face and gave him a haircut. You'll see my mom later on. She was the main caregiver for him, especially since I was gone. I wanted to also bring in our relationship into the project as well. So another thing before I go on with more pictures is just some inspiration as well, some other inspiration. I know you guys are looking at, you know, Ralph Meatyard and a lot of other photographers right now. And, you know, the kinds of images you're seeing in class are going to stick with you. There might be something that you see and you might make a photograph later that is similar because you've been inspired by this image and it just is in your brain and there it is. And you might not even know you're doing it, but we're all so inspired by all the things around us, including other photographers. So Larry Sultan did this book called Pictures from Home, where he blew up old family home videos, and then he made collages sort of like this in the book. But he also photographed his parents as well. So it's like a mix of this past, present. And so that book, and if you guys want to write this down, it would be an interesting one to look at if you want to think about doing work on your family. This is a photograph by Imogen Cunningham, and it was one of the first photographs that I ever loved. And I don't have the image with me right now, but I remember taking a photo of an unmade bed later in high school at some point. And it was because I saw this photo, and it just, you know, that's why I did it. And ever since then, I've been kind of obsessed with photographing people in bed or in like on beds, just surrounded by blankets. It's like this thing. And I just love how she uses light and shadow. Those are hairpins on the bed. So you'll see more images from this project that really kind of evoke this time when I was looking at her photographs a lot. And then Sally Mann, another photographer that I really just learned a lot from when I was very young. And so this is her book called At 12, which is Portraits of Women. And then this photograph, just kind of going back and forth. So this is a photograph that Sally Mann made a long time ago, in 1988. And then I made this photograph of my dad and I during this project. And they're slightly different. And when I made this photograph, I didn't think about Sally Mann's photograph from 1988, but I think that there's something there that I just think that I made this because I saw Sally Mann's work years ago. I think that they all kind of exist together. This is my mom and dad. And I'm just going to scroll through some more. That's my mom and I. Once again, in bed photos. I made this photograph because I really wanted to be the one to be holding her. And so I wanted us to be in a situation where I was on the other end of the hug, you know, kind of I was protecting her, taking over the role of the caregiver, just like she was doing for my dad. And so even though I'm younger and in a natural pose situation, it's the mother that's taking care of the child. I wanted to reverse those roles. I also wanted to bring in environments into the project, places that my dad used to go, places that he worked. This is the Arlington Hotel. I don't think it looks like this anymore because I think they just sold it and now it's going to be renovated. But this is what the dining room used to look like in the Arlington. And my dad worked there as an assistant night manager. And he was in the hotel business. So I wanted to photograph these places that he had once frequented. I also wanted to photograph him in the hotel. So we rented a Arlington hotel room and I brought Dad to the Arlington. We hung out. He didn't know where he was, but he was like, this is great, let's just hang out in here. So, I don't know, I wanted to like photograph him in these places where at one time he was sort of in control. He was the powerful one. He knew what was going on. He worked at the Majestic too before it burned down. If any of you guys remember the Majestic or your parents do, he was the manager there. And I used to go there when I was a kid. I would walk in and run around the hallways and try to find ghosts. And so it felt like these buildings were really immense to me because I was there in them when I was really small. And now they felt really immense with him in them. He felt small. And I think it's because this natural cycle of life where we are born and then we start to get smaller again until we are no longer. And then someone else is born and takes our place. So, so that's why I wanted to bring him here. This is him also in the Arlington at the main front desk, wearing this business jacket for some organization that he used to be the president of. And then I wanted to photograph myself wearing the jacket. And once again, I'm working with diptychs. The image on the left is an archival image from when he sold the Sands motel business to this other person. So he's giving him the keys. So the Sands, you guys have probably seen, it's on Central Avenue. He used to manage that hotel as well. So playing with diptychs again, a present day image of Dad, and then something that he wrote on the back of another photograph. It says, "This is the barracks that I live in." And I think he wrote these notes on the backs of images, and he would mail them to his mother. It's a picture of my mom. So just bringing in old images that kind of make a timeline of his life. And also going back to this idea of still life, looking at objects that he owned, or picking up notes that were written. This note was written by him to remind himself to call my mom, because he couldn't remember if he didn't see the note, and he didn't remember her number, so he had to write it down. And this was taped to a lamp in his living room. Just kind of environmental images right now, trying to think about family, home, you know, this idea of memory being murky. And this is the last image that I have of this project. I realize now you guys are seeing my side view. I hope that's okay. It's probably better if I did full screen, but and so he passed away on March 6th, 2020. And so after, I'm in the middle of documenting this all and documenting him. So the question is, after someone is gone, what left do I have to photograph? At this point, I'm just like mining for information on him. I want to learn about him. I want to know who he was. I want to know who he is. I want to answer questions, because in doing that, I'm trying to figure out who I am, in this whole thing. So when someone is gone, where do we go next with that? If we're artists and if we're photographers and if we want to keep trying to find answers. So I started going back to old things. This was an old video. This is a still from an old video that I made of him in the car before he got dementia, when we were driving out to the country to go to a cemetery. So I have this still of him driving. That's it. I stopped the video, made the still, screenshot, and cropped it. And I just love it, because it's like he's about to turn. You can see the road. Let me see, you can see the road is, in the mirror, it's turning. It's like there's this sense of like, we're going somewhere, you're doing something. It's like this, also this idea of the road of life, kind of. And I really like this still. Oopsie. Oh, there we go. These are other stills from that video. So just, I don't know what I'm going to do with these things. These are just things that I'm collecting. Then we have stills from a more recent video that Dan actually is the director of. I asked Dan to go and film me finding my dad's house that he grew up in. I found out from someone in the part of the country in Bismarck where he's from, that his house was in this one location. And I didn't remember, I'd never been there, didn't know how to find it. My dad couldn't tell me. My mom couldn't remember. And so this man, I met up with him, and he remembered because he grew up there. So he showed me where the house was. The house is completely gone except for, it looks like this. That's me in the middle going through. That's the chimney, which still stands. And so it's like, you know, the project continues, the search continues even when he is not here, and I'm still trying to figure out how to tell the story. I don't know what I'll do with the video. I don't know if these stills mean anything or will mean anything, but I want to have them, and I will start to figure it out. And so the end goal eventually is to have a book. I don't know what that will look like, or what form it will take, but that's what I want to make, is a book on the project. And then hopefully some sort of exhibition where you can walk into a room and you can sort of see images large. You know, there might be objects in the room, maybe a suitcase that he owned, maybe a pair of shoes, you know, just like walking into this person's life that, you know, hopefully will feel universal, because it's not like it's about him, it's about us, it's about memory, it's about love, it's about family, it's about losing yourself, losing your identity, who you were. So the idea is that those things will exist at some point, and so that's what I'm just working on now. A lot of this is stuff like, it's trial and error, you know. Maybe some of these images that I showed you today will never be anywhere. Maybe I'll decide that I hate them and they don't work, and that's okay. But when you do a long-term project, you're thinking years, right? 5 years, 6 years, it's longer. So it's something that you're just working on and you're always trying to figure out. So that's what this is. The last piece is that when I was, you know, thinking about book and images, I also was thinking about this more recent book that came out called Day Sleeper. The photographer is Sam Contis. But have you guys talked about Dorothea Lange yet in class? No? Okay. So Dorothea Lange is a American photographer that was hired in the 30s to photograph farm families during the Depression. But she also photographed a lot of America. And so this very young photographer, Sam, I think she's like 25 or so, decided that she wanted to go through Dorothea Lange's archive and recontextualize the images into a book that she made here. And so maybe there would be a photograph that Dorothea Lange made, but Sam would crop it, you know, or would, you know, put one photograph next to another and tell a different story. And so it was basically like taking an artist's work and then making it your own using their material. And like, what does that mean? Can we do that? Is that okay? Would Dorothea Lange be mad? I don't know. But it's just this idea of playing with images. So she made this book called Day Sleeper. This is a Dorothea Lange photograph on the cover, but the original image is farther back. She cropped in. This is an image from the book. This is a crop. But it's a beautiful, spare, very quiet book. So I started playing with my dad's images and doing the same thing, just for fun. Like, what can I find in the images of him that were not intentionally there, but I can see and maybe make something new out of? Because in that way, I'm still talking with my dad. I'm still talking about him. I'm still figuring him out. But I'm doing it through playing around with these images. So, you know, I cropped this one, right? It's like, whatever. I like it better this way, you know? And there's something about this image where it's not even about, it even speaks to me more about masculinity, more about being a man. You know, there's this hand that's very kind of like in the foreground, and it's got this vein you can see coming from it. It's a man wearing a uniform. It feels very traditionally masculine. it talks about something else than my dad at this point. It's no longer about him, it's about something else. It's like, who is this person? What is this, you know? And so it's changed its context, but it's still him. And so what does that mean? I don't know, but I'm playing around. So here's another image from Sam's book where she just did a huge, very close crop of a woman. I played around with this with my dad, you know. You know, it's just like making new images out of old images. I mean, you could take you could do a project in which you don't take a single photograph. And it would still be a photographic project. It would be a visual project. So, you know, you could go to an encyclopedia and cut out every image in the encyclopedia and then make a book strictly of some edit of those images that means something completely different. So that's another way that you can play with photography that's really interesting and fun. Okay, so this is the last little tiny collage I made, and it's, you know, me and my dad, and then some glamour shot of me. So I'll end this project here. The project itself has been very healing, and that's another thing I wanted to say, is that it's not always about the final product or project or photo or image. It's really about the process of making it. So if you want to go home and photograph your family or photograph your mom, or, you know, you could make an amazing image out of a day spent with her, you know, in the living room. But is the day spent with her in the living room more important? I don't know. You know, are they both just as important, the image and the process? For me, the images might be okay, they might be mediocre, but the process of making them is the part that's the healing aspect that brought my mom and I together, that helped me spend time with my dad. So, you know, photography is so much more than that image itself. It really is all of these things. So I'm going to close out of this one, and I want to show you guys some commissioned work. So this is work that I got paid to do, which is kind of cool, you know, as a person who wants to be able to pay rent and live in the world. I want to show you guys, you know, the difference. I mean, these are not personal project images, but, you know, it's just this idea that with photography, we can go places, we can meet people, we can be put in these crazy situations, and having a camera can sometimes be what brings you into a situation that will help you grow. And I always say it too, for people that are really introverted. I mean, a lot of photographers are super introverted. And sometimes it's like you want to go to that party, or you want to go to the skate park and, like, you know, hang out with some people there, wherever it is. If you have a camera, you have this, like, reason for being there. You know, it's like, well, I have a camera, I have a purpose. I'm gonna document these skateboarders, or I'm gonna, you know, document this rodeo. It allows you to be in a place, and it's like, it's okay. And so it just opens up the world. So yeah, so these are commissions. This first one is a teen rodeo. I had some friends in New York that were from Finland, and they were both reporters. And they wanted to do a story on a rodeo for a Finnish newspaper. So I actually could not read the actual story because it was in Swedish. They speak Sweden and Finland as well. So I don't know what the story is about, except that it's about these teens in the rodeo, and I took the portraits or the pictures. So we went to Pennsylvania. We drove there from New York, and we spent just a day with the teens that were doing this competition. It was really fun. And they are just incredibly talented, so dedicated, amazing people. And it was really cool to get to meet them. Excuse me. And so these are just some, I mean, I made this PDF. I made this PDF so that I could send it to editors to show them the kinds of work that I've done, to say, hey, this is what my work looks like in general. If you're into that, you can hire me, hopefully. So I put this together in order to kind of show them like what I've been hired for in the past. I photographed the mayor of Little Rock for the Atlantic. He is an incredibly kind person and super patient with me. I took forever to photograph him because I kept wanting to ask him to do different things because I thought that I had done a terrible job. But in the end, this portrait, which it works, was probably one of the first images I took of him. But of course, I wasted a lot more of his time than that. But he was really wonderful. So this was in Little Rock right during the pandemic, no cars. This was a story about COVID and the way that he was handling the pandemic. This is a guy named Kalen hanging out in his friend's driveway. Okay, so I also did a story on healthcare workers for The Nation. This is Sherry and her family. She's a home health nurse. This story was basically on just the fact that these nurses were incredibly at risk for getting COVID. I think I deleted some images, sorry. That was not supposed to do that, but I think there's two of this woman, Terry, that I accidentally deleted. So those are Terry's hands, but there are some other images of Terry that got lost. This is Joy. Oh, there's Terry. Oops. Okay. So she moved. I hung out with these women and just listened to their story about how difficult it was to be a nurse during this time. Kelly. I also photographed this woman, Rebecca Martin, for Time. She was a doctor. Oops, that should not say text there. She was a doctor. She's a doctor in Mountain Home. She's a pulmonologist, and she decided in March, when it was the worst last year, to just fly up to New York and volunteer her time to work in the hospitals up there and relieve some of the other doctors who were there. So she just completely did it just to help. She's a really amazing woman. She was profiled. Yep.
That can be done. I mean, you can volunteer at another hospital you don't normally work at.
I think during the pandemic, there was this ability because they were looking for help. So many people had been working, you know, with no days off. They were just completely overwhelmed. So I think there was this call that like, yes, you can do this, like come, if you want to come. You know, and then at different points when the pandemic was worse in different states, people that had already been through it and were kind of doing better, like there were some New York doctors that would then go to California because New York got better, California got worse. So yeah, it is possible to do that. I don't think that it was like specifically like a COVID thing, like now it's okay. There are traveling nurses, traveling doctors, but I think the seriousness of the situation made it a lot easier and less red tape to just be like, I'm going. So that's what she did. And she was profiled by Time and oops. And I took some portraits of her. And then, yeah, just more portraits of her. I mean, it's kind of cool to just see different ways you can do it. I mean, it's hard to make a nice image in a hospital. I mean, it's not like an easy, it's just a person sitting, right? But I made her try to look a million different ways to try to get something that would work for the magazine. So I'm sure she also got tired of me because I asked for a lot of her time. And then the last one is a project I did for Huck magazine, Yemeni boys playing soccer in New York. There is a team that's all Yemenis in New York that's put together by a group of Yemeni business owners that they own delis in the city. New York's amazing because they have entire soccer teams that are of different countries, you know, and everyone plays each other. It's kind of like a World Cup in New York. And I was really good friends with these guys, and they let me photograph them a little bit for this story for Huck magazine. But what's really amazing about them is that this was during 2016. This was during the Trump Muslim ban. A lot of people were either stuck in Yemen, even though they should be able to be back in New York, or stuck in New York and couldn't go and see family in Yemen because of the rules and racist shit he was doing. So a lot of them were recently from Yemen and were new immigrants. Either their parents were living in New York and they were kind of going back and forth, and they finally really needed to bring everyone over, or various other reasons. So a lot of them were still learning English, still getting their feet wet in a huge city that's totally different from where they're from. It was just a cultural shock for a lot of them. So to all be on a soccer team together, you know, it was just a really great resource for people that were just moving and needed friends, needed to get to know where they were. And so they're just incredible guys, and I really love them. And so, yeah, I wish I could still go up there and see them, but hopefully when we're able to travel again. I'm sorry it's kind of taken a while to load, it seems like. And it's probably because and that's it. That's all I have. I hope I didn't go too fast, but I know that you guys might have questions or just want to talk about stuff. Yeah, I don't know. Dan, do you want to take over?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, it's really nice to see these projects here. I think I really appreciate the sincerity that you bring about in your work. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that. We're kind of in this postmodern era, which is fun, but we're kind of in this era where people get their news from comedians, and a lot of artwork comes through memes on our phones. Mm-hmm. And it seems like you're really trying to get a little bit more than that, trying to get more of a sense of who people are, and maybe this kind of sincerity about humanity. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about that, and then maybe a little bit about just the difference in approach to when you're shooting your family and your personal work, and if you're shooting something more impersonal, like a project.
Okay. Yeah, those are great questions. I think to answer the first one, I think you just have to not be worried about the outcome. You can't be worried, you know, if you're a filmmaker, you can't be making a film because you want to get an Academy Award. If you're a photographer, you can't make work because you want to get the Pulitzer, or, you know, you want to get published, because then the work is gonna be bad. I mean, honestly, the odds are that it's gonna look like that. And so I think the idea is that, you know, it's hard because with photography, you do feel often that you're taking. I mean, you are photographing someone's life, they are letting you in. There is this power dynamic. So I think that photographers deal with that a lot, just knowing what's okay, what's not okay. And you have to just be there with the people that you're with. The camera can be there, but like, it's not why you're there. You have to care about people, you have to care about yourself, you have to just be living in the world. And then if you see something and it makes sense, then you say, okay, can I photograph that? Is that okay? Like, and then you do. And I think that's where it comes from, is that you're really living in the present. You're enjoying the conversation you're having with this person. You're curious. You just have to be curious. You just want to be present, and you just want to like enrich your life by knowing these people. And if you do that and you bring a camera, I think something will come out of that. I think you know, we can be bad technically, and I'm not the best technical photographer, like for real. I still am learning what to do with the studio setup. I'm still learning all of those things, but it's not about your camera. It's not about technique. It's not about any of those things. Because if you don't have the heart and the intention and the curiosity, then you could be the best technical photographer in the world and the work will just not feel like anything. So, you know, you can't really fake that. You just have to be it. And if you're that, then the work will be amazing no matter what, because it will speak to people, because that's what they want to see, because we're all human and we want to feel something. We want to feel that humanity. And so, you know, I would say don't worry about the technical stuff. Don't worry about the camera that you have. You could have a point and shoot. You could have a phone, but like, just be with people, you know, and be vulnerable, be with them, be yourself. That's a lot. That sounds like a lot of like, you know, self-therapy, like mumbo jumbo, but I think it's real. And I think it translates into the work. Second question, the difference between personal work, intimate work, and work you're paid to do, or like work where you spend just a few days with people, right?
Yeah, I think kind of what I'm asking is the personal aspect of photographing family, how you treat that difference
Yeah.
than if you're maybe shooting the mayor, for instance. If there's
Yeah. Okay. I mean, it's interesting, you know. Here's a good example, a short story, is that when I first started to do the project on my dad, on my family, I can't find it now. I actually was not taking photographs. I was actually videotaping them, filming them. So I have hours of video of my family where I would just follow my dad to his doctor's appointment, or I would photograph him, you know, my mom helping him in the shower, or just these kind of like mundane daily things that are what's happening when you're dealing with an illness. I did that for a year before I realized that, okay, maybe I have some interesting video, but also I'm not a very good, I mean, technically that is actually kind of a thing where you kind of have to be good with technique stuff for video. Like, I'm sure the sound was terrible in most situations because I didn't know a lot about sound. But the moral of the story is that I realized that filming my parents was not going to work. Maybe it would work for another family, but for ours, it didn't make sense. And I realized that it was intrusive in a way that was causing kind of anxiety between us all. It was making my mom kind of like, what should I be saying? You know, it was not the right medium. And so I put the video camera away and I was like, okay, I'm not going to do that. Also, if I have a video camera in my hand and my dad needs help, like me helping him get through the door, or like I can't be a daughter and a filmmaker at the same time. I couldn't figure out how to be one and the other and then one and the other. But if I decided to take portraits or to make images, I could spend the majority of the day just being a daughter, and then I could say, okay, Dad, we have 20 minutes. I really want to do this, have this idea for a photo. And that's it. And then the camera's gone and it's away. And then I'm just with him. And I think that kind of answers the question before too, the first question. It's just about being there. But I think obviously there is an intimacy in images you're going to get with people that have let you in for years and years that you're not going to get if you photograph the mayor of Little Rock, and that's okay. Like, they're going to be different. I think within all of that is a difference. Like, you know, one person's family may say, I actually don't want you to take portraits of me at all. And so either you don't do that project, or you decide to use archival, or you decide to write about them, you know? So it's, I think when you're making intimate work, it's about finding out what makes you feel like you're doing what's true to you, but also what makes those that you're photographing or documenting comfortable. And you have the intimacy and the time with them to feel it out. And you can show them the work and say, what do you think of this image? Like, do you like the way you look in it? Does it matter if you like it? Like, are you upset about it? Like, do you really feel like this shows who you are? Like, there's this back and forth you can do, because those are your family, those are your friends, whoever. You know, so there's just more richness that I think then translates into a image that's richer too, you know.
Well, let's see, we have a question in our chat, and we'll let people chime in here too, but on our chats, it was a question about if your dad actually saw the photographs and what he thought of the photographs.
Mm-hmm.
He did see them.
Yeah, he did. I mean, it's one of those things where, you know, in the moment, he would know I'm taking a picture. So, and I would say, Dad, can I take your portrait? Yes. Can you do this? Yes. Will you put your hand here? Yes. And then, you know, I would show him the images. It's hard to know when he looked at them what he thought, because he wasn't really able to concentrate towards the end. But when he was before dementia, he was always someone that wanted to be photographed. I mean, he would be like, Liz, take my picture. You know, he just loved, you know, he was a confident person. He liked being in front of the camera. And so I think if he were able to, he would be able to say that he liked them. I think he would like them. But there was that constant consent, you know, we're doing this, Dad, what do you think? Do you want to do this? And he would always be able to say, yes, let's do that. That sounds good. So, I mean, it makes me sad that he's not able to kind of critique it or deconstruct it or anything. But it enabled us to be close in a way in the moment that, you know, just meant so much. So it's a great question.
Anybody have any questions out there in the world? I see Ava, you've got a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering, like, at what point in your dad's health decline did you decide that you wanted to document? And at that time, did you realize that in the end, what you would be doing was documenting the end of his life? Or, like, at what point did you realize that that's what you were doing?
That's a great question, Ava. Thank you. He was diagnosed with dementia in 2012. And at the time, I was not even taking photos. I did not start documenting him until 2017. So it was really like the parts where it was getting worse and worse. In the beginning of that documentation, when I was doing the video still, he was kind of funny, like still he could make jokes. He was with it, and he's always been a very witty person. And towards the end, it was just very little speaking at all, just kind of being lovely and still being kind of a rascal and making jokes every once in a while. But it was just, I could see it, you know, just, I knew, but I didn't know, I didn't think about the ending. I think that's another thing. It's like that question, right? You don't think about what the end result is going to be. I didn't really think about him passing and me photographing the very end. I was really very much in the present. And so I wasn't there. But that's another thing too, is that you continue to make these decisions all throughout. Like, am I going to photograph him in the hospital bed towards the very, very end, like the day of? And I'm like, no, hell no, I'm not going to do that. No, I'm just going to be there with my dad. That's it, you know? So everyone is different and everyone is going to do it a different way. And it's just these questions that arise that you answer for yourself constantly, you know? And you kind of choose your battles. Like, does it make more sense to take this portrait, or do I just want to sit and hold his hand and watch TV, you know? But no, to answer the question, I did not know that was the end game, sort of. But I think when you're living in the present and you're just photographing through it, then you just keep going, and you can decide to stop whenever, you know. And another thing too, I know so many wonderful photographers that like photograph all kinds of things in the world, but would never photograph this. It just wouldn't be what they would do, because they would want to either experience it, or they would find the photographing of it too hard or too difficult for them. So it's all such a personal thing, you know, whether or not you want to go there or not, or how you want to do it. So.
Okay, anybody with questions on the?
What was that? That one with the your father and the azalea bush again?
Yeah. Do I have it? Oh my God! Look at my desktop.
Whoa.
Yeah, here it is. Yeah.
So, what's the symbolism of that?
You know, I took these images separately. I did not think about them together. I took them at different years, actually. I think one was a year later. But I was looking at images together and I was playing with ideas. And actually, a friend of mine put these together on the floor of our apartment. And she was just like, you know, these show such softness about your dad. Like, his back is kind of, you know, he's gotten older and it's kind of frail, and there's just a softness to the way he's sitting and the blankets, and the light is warm in both images. And she just put them together and she said, you know, I don't know what it is about this, but it's the softness, but it's also just the fact that the symbolism of flowers growing, dying, turning brown. He grew those flowers. He is dying. We are all dying as soon as we are born. We're in the process of dying, right? And so are flowers. So I think there's all those little things. I'm not trying to like create reasons behind it, because I think at some point too, you just put some images together and you're like, I don't know what it is, but I like it, you know? But I think when you like something naturally, then you can go back and say, why do I like this? And you start to find answers, you know? And I think that's kind of what I feel when I look at them together.
Well, let's see, we've got a question here from our chat. Since you have pictures from New York and Arkansas, what has been your favorite place to photograph? I'd like to maybe ask a side question, maybe if you could maybe talk about the difference between working in New York and Arkansas, tie it in with that.
Okay. You know, it's funny. I loved photographing my Yemeni community friends in New York specifically because I just had such good, wonderful times with them and I just love spending time. But I feel like New York is to me, overwhelming place to photograph. And I'm not a street photographer. I'm not gonna walk down like Times Square and like photograph people. Like it's just not my thing. So for me, if I'm gonna photograph in a place like that, I need to just tunnel in to like one person, one environment, one scene, and just like look at that. Because when I look out, it's too busy, it's too crazy for me. For that reason, I really love photographing in Arkansas because I just love photographing rural places. I love being out in the woods. I love photographing nature and just being in places where there might be only one thing in the frame, you know, or it's just the light is different. It's quieter. I like those environments more. In terms of a working photographer, being back here after having been in New York has been really positive because when I was up there, I had, you know, a billion jobs and I'm not like a well-known photographer. I was learning, I'm still not, but, you know, I was around people that I got to know and that could kind of help me. And so, you know, I met people there that now have asked me to do work or hired me to do work. And being here, I'm sort of one of only a few photographers working at least in this kind of genre. And so, you know, I think I might be hired more because I'm in a place where there's less, you know, people running around. I mean, it's just kind of a different level of, I guess, you know, in New York, there's just photographers everywhere. So, you know, you like trip over 5 photographers just walking to the subway. So it's just a different world. But I think that's what's so great about, like, for me, I couldn't wait to get out of Arkansas when I was young because I wanted to explore. But you never forget where you're from, and like this place that's why I'm back, because it's like this is what nourishes me and being here nourishes me. But I think we need to have both. We need to like be rooted, but we also need to like be able to go and see and explore and like play and I do think that having a camera can be a vehicle for being able to put yourself in a position to be outside of the country or to be in a different state and do something like a project. So I think that's what's great about it. I don't know if I answered the question, but I kind of rambled.
So yeah, but some people don't even remember where they were born. Like they moved when they were very young. Like I was born down in Louisiana, Bossier City, but I moved here when I was 3.
Yeah.
Been here ever since. Yeah.
Well, that could be a cool project. You could go back there and photograph it. You know, like obviously you have no memories of it, but like what if you went back and photographed where you were then? You know, like the house you might have lived in, your parents lived in, or the landscape. It could be an interesting project.
Yeah.
We've got a couple more questions in our chat here. And the question is, did you like photography from the beginning, or was it something that your family encouraged you to do?
Okay. I definitely liked photography from, I think, the age of like 13. I am not from an artistic family. Whenever I describe the creative environment that I grew up in, I say that my parents had off-white walls and brown carpet. That explains the interests of my family that I grew up in. Like no artists, no interest in art, no interest in theater, no interest in any of those things. So all of that, I just, you know, I think growing up and having the Hot Springs Documentary Film Festival was really huge for me. I mean, my dad was a businessman, but he had like an artist heart. So I think there was like a lot of emotion in him, that he liked to talk about feelings. And obviously he liked photographs from when he was younger, and he kept scrapbooks. So that was his creative side, but I was definitely not encouraged to go into the arts. Basically, they were like, whatever you want to do, you should do. So I definitely was not discouraged either, and that was really good. But I often feel jealous of like people that like grew up and their parents were like painters and sculptors, and like I'm just like, wow, must be nice. But I think that I think we kind of come into the world sort of pretty formed, and just have to go with it. And I hope that parents, for the most part, encourage those things in their children. But I know that's not always true. I had the encouragement, but I didn't have like the inspiration, or the like, oh, I know someone, you should go talk to them. It was like, no, there were no photographers really in Arkansas that I knew or met or anything, so, but yeah, it is what it is. So,
Let's see, we've got another question here, and we've got about another 6 or 7 minutes.
okay.
But the question is, how did you go about finding work when you first started?
Um, a lot of it would be, I would assist other photographers. Also, through school, we would get to have like a portfolio review at the end of our school. So we would meet editors, and we would get a list of like, okay, these are the editors that you just met that are working right now, and you could show them your portfolio. I mean, at the time, my portfolio was pretty bad. I mean, I had just been a student, and I had not made very much. But getting those emails and sending an email and saying like, here's what I'm working on, what do you think? And pitching stories. So the Yemeni boys soccer story, I was actually just photographing them for myself. It was like this project on my dad. It was a personal project. I have tons of images that have never even been dealt with from that project. It's like something I can't even look at right now. It's just, I have so much to do with it, like a lot to look at and fix. But I was just hanging out with these guys, and I was like, I really feel like this is an important story. So I heard that Huck Magazine accepted, pitches. And I talked to my friend Cherie, who's also an Arkansan, and she is a writer, a journalist. And I pitched the story, and I said, this is why I think, and actually, Dan, if you want, I could even email you like the pitch that I made to the magazine if you want to send it to everybody.
Sure. Yeah.
So you guys can see the way that I wrote, like, okay, there's this group of kids, and they're all from Yemen, and they play soccer, and this is why it's important, and this is how I know them, and this is what I'll do if you hire me. I can send you that email. But basically, the editor responds and says, that's actually a really good story for our next publication, because we're doing the entire magazine on youth culture. Your story seems to fit in with that. So, and then, so then we got that pitch. Unfortunately, it's hard because, journalism is changing, and magazines are closing, and it's not a very bright future for a lot of this kind of work. But I think you just have to find avenues that work for you. Have a day job, do it on the side. That's what I do still, and just keep making work. And it's going to be, if it's meant, it's going to be seen, and it's going to matter as long as you keep doing it. And so, that's what I just continue to kind of do.
Let's see, anybody with questions? Anybody online? Okay, let's see what time we got here. Well, we're just kind of wrapping up. Well, boy, this has been really great. I guess we can maybe finish up a little bit with just what's the next step. I know you talked a little bit about putting it into a photo book possibly, which I think the family portraits would make a really great photo book.
Mhm.
Is that part of your next step, or how are things evolving
Yeah.
right now?
Yeah. So, yeah, a little transparency about my life right now is that, moving back to Arkansas was tough just because I left everything behind and my dad passed and I've still been grieving. It'll be a year in March that he's passed, so I'm still going through all that. But I found a part-time job in which I'm taking portraits of families in this studio in Benton, and it pays enough that I can kind of like scrape by. And I've been doing some other assignments like the ones I showed you. So I'm just sort of like cobbling together these different photography related jobs. I've even done some architecture, like photography of homes that are going to be for sale with like real estate. There's like lots of different kind of ways you can make photography happen for you. So I've been kind of just dabbling in all that. I've been working on this project, and like you said, Dan, I do want it to be a book, and it will be. I have to say that like it's been really hard to look at it and play around with it since his death, but I know that will get easier. It's just a process, and I'm trying to give myself a lot more grace and time to just go with it when it feels right. Where I'm at now, like showing you guys like the studio setup. So I know you guys have this awesome studio right next door to the classroom that you're in right now, and it's so cool, and I wish I had all the lights that you guys have. But what I'm doing now, which is out of my comfort zone, is I'm going to start photographing my dad's objects. And so I have a studio set up. Obviously, it's got some of my clothes and stuff on it right now, but basically I want to photograph his objects and have those sort of be visual breaks between the portraits and the other images. So I think when I have those together, I think the book will make more sense. I need more context. And so I want to photograph his shoes in like a beautiful way, like light, natural. I mean, like very simple, like soft light photograph of his shoes. Or he had this suitcase that was like this tiny little briefcase, and inside it he would have all of this travel stuff for his hotel trips, and it was like little soap, little comb, and it's like this like little man's like briefcase of like, I'm going on a sales trip, and I want to photograph that. I want to photograph his jacket that he wore all the time. So I'm trying to figure out how to integrate these studio style images alongside the other stuff. And so I haven't gotten very far, or I would show them to you, but that's kind of the next step for me, at least in this project.
Okay, well, we are out of time. The one last question came in just right at the last minute. It was if you have a favorite photograph that you've ever taken before.
Oh God. I do not. I don't. No, I usually hate all of my photos. I think that's like, I just don't like any of it. But I mean, I do like this diptych on the screen right here. I think that at least for the project, I think it's a nice kind of entry image. But I do not have a favorite. Maybe one day. It's been really nice to meet y'all.
Yeah, can we get a
Yep.
And good luck in class with everything. So it's very exciting.
Okay, yeah, this was great. Well, appreciate everybody's time. Liz, appreciate you stopping by today.
Absolutely.
And I guess everybody will see you back on Monday.
Thank you so much.
Thank y'all. Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.